So the Library Trilogy by Mark Lawrence, and this is the first book in that trilogy called The Book That Wouldn't Burn. And overall, I'm really, really happy I read this. It's an excellent book. I was recommended it on a Discord channel, and whoever it was, I can't remember who actually said read this book, but thank you to that person because I'm very glad I read this book. It was really worth my time. Uh, I think its biggest strength is that it falls into a number of categories that people like when they're reading books. So it kind of spans a lot of genres, and it executes all of those really well. I'm saying really, really a lot. I think it's good. It's a good book. So what I mean by that is you could read this book as almost a puzzle mystery book. There, you kind of just throws you into this slightly odd scene and setting, and there's world building elements that aren't made incredibly clear, and you see it a lot of it through the eyes of quite a young, relatively naive, relatively sheltered isn't quite the right word, but who has a very limited world experience through this character. You kind of pick up this world building, and it almost takes you onto a little bit of a puzzle where you're trying to figure out one, where the plot's going, and two, what's really happening. And it does that well. It was interesting. I was second guessing everything, and I liked that. It was good. It made me think, and I was keen to get to the end. The kind of how that plays out was executed well. I think it wasn't mind blowingly good, at least to me, but it was definitely, the mystery wasn't a letdown for me anyway. So you could also class this, I think, as a fantasy book. So fantasy readers are going to like it, but I think you could well say it's a science fiction book as well. It kind of spans those genres, and it isn't abundantly clear, which one of those it is really. I'd say it's probably more fantasy than sci-fi, but I could see someone um, stringently arguing that it's sci-fi, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree with them. Um, in terms of kind of broader philosophical themes, and making being more than just a story, trying to teach you something and trying to make you think more, in your own in your own head, in your own life. It does that well, really well. It kind of touches on there's a few themes it covers, and some are a little bit on the nose, some are a little really obvious, and hammered a little bit too hard, and you kind of roll your eyes a little bit. And some of them are actually done, very tastefully, very skillfully, and really really made me think. And I suspect I will be thinking about it for a while after having read it. The plot itself is engaging and interesting. The characters are reasonable, and you want to see what's going on. There's some exceptionally good characters as well, who are kind of touched on. Um, so it kind of what I'm trying to say is it touches all of these themes and all of these categories to the point where you could almost recommend this book to anyone. If you like lit fic, I think you'd like this. If you like science fiction, I think you'd like this. If you like um, philosophy, I think you'd like this. If you like mystery, I think you'd like this. And all of those are executed well. The prose itself is written is is well written. I wouldn't quite say it's masterful, and I'll get to that maybe a little bit when I talk about the negatives. But it's very good. It's very competent. There are flashes of brilliance. There were just a few bits, and it's a very long book, so I'm being a little bit pernickety here. But there were bits of it where the sentences I had to kind of reread them a few times to see the point he was getting at, and whilst generally when I'm doing that, it's because I just don't understand, and the writing's a little bit beyond me. In this one, I think it was just the sentences weren't clearly constructed. But it's nearly a 600-page book. You've got to be a little bit forgiving of those things. And generally, it was very well written, I thought, and very good. The other thing I think people is going to appeal to a certain amount of people is the book is obviously, and I haven't really talked about the book too much. I will go into kind of the setting of it in a second, but not in too much detail. But the book itself concerns a library, and because of that, it's almost like you can tell it's a book written for people who are interested in books and avid readers. I think the more broad your reading history has been, the more interesting you're going to find this book. I suspect there were a few like subtler references to certain authors and certain books, which I got, and when I did get them, I chuckled quite a lot. And so I suspect someone who is better read than me is going to have even more experience, or even more experience, and therefore a better time when they're reading that part of the book. And those nods happened throughout, and genuinely one of them had me laughing on the train for like 2 or 3 minutes. It was a sort of a veiled insult on Enid Blyton, who I'd grown up with, and it was like really, really funny. So yeah, I think you're going to get a lot out of this, and I think I think maybe more sophisticated readers are going to get even more out of this than I did. But overall, I really liked it. I'm so glad that it was recommended to me. It was recommended by someone in a Discord channel, and I can't remember who it is. But if you happen to be watching and you happen to know it was you, thank you, and let me know in the comments. So the book itself, I'll talk about the book itself, and then I'll go maybe into the things I didn't like as much. I will keep that brief. So the book it follows two characters, one of which is a young girl who lives kind of out in the sticks, has a pretty harsh life, and sort of seeking a better life for her, and is clearly, beyond in terms of intelligence and capabilities, is clearly sort of always wanting more, and is probably a bit out of doesn't quite fit in with the life that she should have if she stayed in this place. The other one concerns a slightly older boy who is essentially living in a library and is essentially trapped in that. That's it. I think I'm sort of not going to talk about it anymore. I think you'll find out as you read it, but I would just note that the plot is good, it's interesting, it's engaging, the mysteries are there, and they're well executed, and it's worth your time reading it. So coming on to the things I didn't like about it, and the first thing I'll say is almost playing off that its main strength, which is it touches a lot of genres, it executes those very well. It's sort of a 4 out of 5 in how it executes all of those different categories. So it never quite hits excellence in anything that it does. It's just a good all-rounder book. So for instance, the prose styling is very good, but I'm currently reading James Blish's Black Easter, and that when I'm reading that, I just kind of think I'm in the depths of someone who is just a master at what they're doing, and someone who is just something special as an author. I didn't get that quite with Mark Lawrence. He's very good, he's very competent, but I don't think, and obviously this is all very subjective, but I don't think he's anything particularly special. I wouldn't put him in those, in the Silverberg level or the James Blish level of literary mastery. And that's true for, almost every category. You can make the same thing. The puzzle element is very good, very interesting, but the payoff is good, very good, but not exceptional. I wasn't jaw on the floor. I wasn't completely wowed, by both kind of the mystery and the reconciliation of that mystery. And don't get me wrong, right? This is the first book in a series of 3. There's obviously going to be more to it, right? So I, park that to an extent, because it may be that he's setting up for something, way beyond what he achieved in this book, in the 3rd book. Some revelation or something that will, blow me away. But it didn't quite do it in this first book. So kind of on its own, that's my thoughts on this. That might change when all the books come out. The other things, I could labour that point about it doesn't execute everything brilliantly in every category. I think I made that point now. But just note that it's true for everything I've said, every category I've mentioned. The other things, and what I haven't done actually, is read any reviews or looked up really any opinions on this book. I am in a Discord group and there are people who talk about it, but other than that, I don't really know anything about how this book's been received. I suspect it's been received well because it's a very good book, but I don't even know its Goodreads rating. Although I have reviewed it on Goodreads, I have given it a star rating, I think. So the first one, and according to my Discord group, I'm way off here, but the characters, I didn't think were anything special at all. They were competent and they fulfilled their role for the plot very well. And there's one who is an exceptionally good character who I really enjoyed. But the protagonists just kind of filled a role to me. They were very cookie cutter. You can maybe hear a dog now. I suspect there's a postman coming in. I'm going to wait. You might see some rubbish editing in a second. So they were very cookie cutter. The protagonist is an exceptional girl who's naive and likes breaking the rules. And that, you could put so many characters in that. And I don't think she did anything in particular that separated her or made her particularly distinct from any of the other characters. Now there is an arc, and things happen to the character obviously, and they become something else, and because of that I think you could maybe argue there is some more weight to her a little bit by the end, but even so I don't think it subverts the point I've just made, that she's kind of very cookie cutter. And then the other protagonist is similar. To me, he was just very bland. Again, not bad, served his role in the plot very well, but just not the best. The length is a problem, I think, or it was to me. The middle, almost like 50%, right? So quite a lot of the book is slow, like really slow. To the point where I kind of had to power through how to get it done. It was. I think this is really personal to me, right? Because some people like a slow burn and they like being in the world. They like learning more about the world building, about the characters, about what drives them, about how everything coalesces into the plot. And I get that, and I respect that, but that's not what interests me personally at this stage. And so it is slow, and it doesn't feel necessarily slow. Like I said, like the characters are, it doesn't feel slow for the sake of, it doesn't justify being slow, I think. So the characters aren't great, and the slowness didn't really add to the characterization for me personally. Now, obviously, that's going to be different for many different people. I know some people absolutely love these characters and think it's kind of one of the best things about the book. So, but for me personally, yeah, they were just a bit nothingy. I keep thinking of the Alan Partridge quote where he just goes, "They're a bit petrolly." So for the 3 people who watch Alan Partridge, you might get that. I'll delete that. I think that's it for the negatives, right? And I hope that doesn't kind of poison what I said at the start. I really, really love this. I wouldn't quite go as far to say love this book, but I very much enjoyed this book. I will be reading the rest. And I very much enjoyed this book. I'll be reading the rest. And also, I kind of have to hold my judgment a little bit because this is the first book in a series of 3. And, the first book is generally generally a bit slower because it does need to world build. It does need to get you into the head of the characters a bit. And so, all of this might be redundant by the time the third book comes out, but I will be reading the other 2. I'm very glad I read it. I think almost everyone who likes reading should read this book. Cheers.